During the dry season months following the rain's retreat, Ajaan Mun preferred to hike along footpaths in the surrounding wilderness, seeking secluded locations where he could practice the way of Dhamma in the manner most suited to his temperament. When the time came for us to leave Nonni Waite's charnel ground and head to the wilderness, Ajaan Mun told me to prepare his belongings for the journey and await his instructions. His modest belongings were limited to the 8 basic requisites of a monk: a lower robe, an upper robe, an outer robe, an alms bowl, a razor to shave his head, a needle for mending robes, a cloth water strainer, and a waist belt. I quickly packed all his gear with mine. We were now ready to go the moment he gave the command. Once he had, I slung his bowl over one shoulder and mine over the other, and walked behind Ajaan Mun as he headed out. I never asked him about our destination. I simply followed him with a mind fully focused on the path in front of me. Although Ajaan Mun leaned on a wooden staff when he walked, his pace was remarkably fast. After all this time, I can still remember the sound of the quick rhythm of his footfalls on the earthen path. I felt as though I had to run to keep up with him nearly every time we were on the trail. He walked that quickly. That year, we set up camp in the vicinity of Nong Nam Kem village, where we spent several months living and practicing in the village's charnel ground. Ajaan Mun liked the location because it was surrounded by a cool, shady forest and situated close to an abundant supply of fresh water. From the years 1939 to 1941, I was the monk who most often accompanied Ajaan Mun on his Dhutanga wanderings, which enabled my meditation practice to steadily progress as a result of the teachings he gave me during each outing. I was fortunate to have learned many new things during these excursions, but the training was intense, which forced me to remain sharp-eyed and on the ball at every moment. I had to think on my feet and make quick, sensible decisions in his presence. Otherwise, he wouldn't allow me to stay with him. I observed Ajaan Mun attentively when we were together and listened carefully to his explanations, straining to make out his remarks when he spoke softly, careful not to miss any words of wisdom. Through his guidance, I was able to resolve many doubts I had about the Buddha's teachings and their application, for which I've been forever grateful. One evening, as I gently massaged Ajaan Mun's tired limbs at Nong Nam Kem village, he told me a captivating story about an extraordinary vision that arose in his meditation while he was living deep in a mountainous region of Chiang Mai. The hour was 3 a.m., a time when his body elements were especially subtle. He had just awoken from sleep and was sitting calmly in meditation when he noticed that his mind wanted to rest in complete tranquility. He quickly entered a state of deep samadhi and remained there for about 2 hours. As his mind withdrew from that state and began returning to normal waking consciousness, it paused at the level of access concentration. There, he became aware of certain events unfolding in his mind's eye. In his vision, a huge elephant walked up to Ajaan Mun and knelt before him, indicating it wanted him to mount. Ajaan Mun promptly climbed onto its back and sat straddling its neck. Once he was settled on the elephant, he noticed 2 other elephants following behind him, both carrying young monks on their backs. The elephants were also very large, though slightly smaller than the one Ajaan Mun was riding. The 3 elephants appeared very handsome and majestic, like royal elephants that possess human-like intelligence and intimately know their master's wishes. When the other 2 elephants reached him, he led them toward a mountain range that was visible in the distance. Ajaan Mun felt the whole scene to be exceptionally majestic, as though he were escorting the 2 young monks away from the perpetual cycle of birth and death. Upon reaching the mountain range, his elephant led them all to the entrance of a cave that was recessed into a hillside a short distance up the mountain. As soon as they arrived, his elephant turned around, placing its rear toward the entrance. With Ajaan Mun still straddling its neck, it backed into the cave until its rear end touched the back wall. The other 2 elephants, with the 2 young monks astride, walked forward into the cave. Each then stood in place on opposite sides of Ajaan Mun's elephant, facing inward as his faced outward. Ajaan Mun then spoke to the two monks as if he were giving them his final, parting instructions. "I have reached my final hour of birth in a human body. Perpetual existence in the conventional world will soon cease altogether for me. Never again shall I return to the world of living and dying. I want you both to continue your monastic lives and develop your minds to the fullest extent possible. Before long, you will follow in my footsteps and depart this world in the same manner as I am preparing to do now. Escaping from the world of sentient existence, with its clinging attachments and its agonizing pain and suffering, is an extremely difficult task that demands unwavering commitment. You must pour every ounce of energy into the struggle to prevail in this noble endeavor, including facing the threshold of death, before you can expect to attain complete freedom from craving and delusion. Once freed, you will never again fear death, nor will you grasp again at future birth and experience further death as a result. Having completely transcended even the slightest attachments, I shall depart this world unfettered, much like a captive released from bondage. Unlike people whose desperate clinging to life causes them immense suffering at the time of death, I have no regrets whatsoever about letting go of sentient existence for good. Therefore, you should not mourn my passing, for nothing good will come of it. Such grief merely promotes an increase of defilements in the mind, which the wise have never encouraged." When he finished speaking, Ajaan Mun told the two young monks to back their elephants out of the cave. Both elephants had been standing perfectly still, one on either side, as though they too were listening to Ajaan Mun's parting words and mourning his imminent departure. In that moment, all three elephants resembled real, living animals rather than visual images. At his command, the elephants carrying the young monks slowly backed out of the cave, all the while facing Ajaan Mun with their regally dignified demeanors. Then, as Ajaan Mun sat astride its neck, his elephant began to bore its hindquarters into the cave wall to its rear. When half of the elephant's body had penetrated the wall of the cave, Ajaan Mun's mind began to withdraw from samadhi, bringing an end to the vision. Having never experienced such an unusual vision before, Ajaan Mun analyzed it and understood its meaning to be twofold. Firstly, when he died, two young monks would attain full enlightenment after his demise, though he didn't specify who they were. Secondly, the vision demonstrated the abiding importance of both samatha and vipassana meditation. The samatha approach to meditation encompasses practices like the stages of samadhi that aim to achieve mental calm and concentration. Vipassana focuses on practices, such as body contemplation, that foster insight into the true nature of suffering and its causes. Ajaan Mun clearly understood the benefits that an arahant gains from practicing both of these modes of meditation from the time he attains enlightenment until the time of his death. During that period of his life, he must rely on samatha and vipassana to be his Dhamma abodes. These abodes are experienced as spheres of blissful abiding here and now that help to ease the tension that occurs between the liberated mind and the five mundane aggregates, both of which remain interdependent until the moment when the mundane aggregates and the transcendent mind go their separate ways at the time of death. After an arahant passes away, samatha and vipassana cease to function and disappear like all other conditioned phenomena. Ajaan Mun was heartened to know that two young monks would realize the highest Dhamma around the time of his death, either just before or soon after. He said it was very strange that, in his parting instructions to them, he spoke about his own impending death as though his time had already come. When Ajaan Mun finished speaking, he remained silent. I continued waiting expectantly, eager to hear him reveal the names of those two young monks. But he didn't say another word. Of all the great meditation monks I've lived and practiced with, I admired and respected Ajaan Mun the most. He was, without question, the most outstanding teacher I had ever met. Living and studying under his guidance for many years, I never saw him act contrary to the Dhamma or the Vinaya. His behavior was in complete harmony with the Buddha's teachings, and it never caused his students to doubt him. From my observations, he faithfully kept to the straight and narrow path of those noble disciples who practice rightly and truly. He never strayed from that path in the slightest. When Ajaan Mun described the beginning stages of his practice, he spoke about his effort to develop mindfulness and his preference for living alone. When he lived with other monks, their social conduct could hinder his meditation progress. When living on his own, he found that all his activities were infused with mindfulness and wisdom, which enabled his mind to fully engage in meditation practice all the time. Early in his monastic career, Ajaan Mun resolved never to return to this world of continued death and rebirth. No matter how much time and effort were required, he was determined to gain release from suffering in this lifetime and never be born again. He regarded his birth in the world of human affairs as a cause for dismay. When he saw the effects of birth, aging, sickness, and death experienced by all classes of living beings, it only increased his dismay and strengthened his motivation to seek complete freedom from suffering before he died. Wherever he lived, he resolved to diligently practice the Buddha's teachings. He desired nothing that might delay his release from suffering. Ajaan Mun spent years trekking alone through forests and mountains in search of secluded places that offered body and mind a calm, quiet environment in which to practice meditation. For the most part, he lived entirely outdoors, at the mercy of the elements and the vagaries of the weather. His daily life was full of forests and mountains, rivers and streams, caves, overhanging cliffs, and dangerous wild animals. Normally, he didn't remain in the same place for more than a single rains retreat. When the rainy season ended, he wandered peacefully through wilderness areas like a bird burdened only by its wings, free to fly wherever it wished. Ajaan Mun preferred living in the wilderness because the environment was not only spiritually challenging, but also free from worldly distractions. Camped in the wilds, he could push his practice to the limit without being sidetracked by less important issues. Wherever he cast his glance, whatever he contemplated, his ultimate purpose was at the forefront, fostering a clear sense of direction in his meditation. Through his own heroic efforts, Ajaan Mun became keenly aware of the practical value that Dhutanga observances had for practicing monks. He clearly understood that each of these practices is a very effective means of closing off the outlets through which a monk's mental defilements tend to flow. He could see that each ascetic practice promoted specific virtuous qualities, while its observance reminded a monk not to carelessly think in ways that contradicted the very virtue he was trying to develop. Always on guard, a dedicated Dhutanga monk immediately became aware of any lapses in judgment and resolved to remedy those failures in the future. In addition to teaching the Dhutangas to his students, Ajaan Mun taught a variety of meditation methods, all of which were completely in line with the practical teachings of the Buddha. For example, he taught the recollection of the Buddha and mindfulness of breathing as a means of producing peace and tranquility in the heart. He taught the 4 foundations of mindfulness and body contemplation for developing wisdom. He instructed his disciples to probe deeply to discover the truth about birth, aging, sickness, and death, showing them how to uproot the real causes of suffering from their minds. And he guided them every step of the way with precise instructions and timely advice. Because of his compassionate efforts, many monks of his lineage were able to attain an extraordinary level of success in their meditation. Ajaan Mun taught his disciples that if they aimed to become firmly established in the practice, they must be willing to put everything on the line to achieve that goal, both their bodies and their minds. Everything except their mindful focus must be sacrificed for the sake of attaining the ultimate Dhamma. Even their lives should not be exempted. Whatever happened, nature should be allowed to take its course. Everyone who is born must die. Nothing is gained from trying to resist that inevitability. Truth cannot be found by denying the natural order of things. Instead, a monk must be resolute and brave in the face of death. Ajaan Mun was particularly vocal when encouraging his disciples to live in isolated wilderness areas teeming with wild animals, places where they came face to face with challenges that would motivate them to discover the virtues of meditation for themselves. The demanding nature of such environments encouraged serious practitioners to reflect inwardly and find within themselves a safe refuge, an inner space where external perils could not threaten their mental equilibrium. Discovering this inner refuge required great courage, skill, and strength of mind. For Ajaan Mun, regularly maintaining that attitude meant pursuing the life of a homeless wanderer intent on renunciation and solitude. Having renounced the world and gone forth from home, he wore robes made from discarded cloth, depended on alms for food, and took the forest as his dwelling place. From the day he first ordained until the last day of his life, his entire lifestyle and the example he set for his disciples were modeled on the principles of fewness of wishes and contentment with little. Ajaan Mun's lifestyle personified contentment with the absolute minimum. When he walked to a village to collect food offerings, he didn't harbor expectations about what kind of food he would receive, nor did he verbally solicit alms from the inhabitants. If he received generous offerings of food, he felt fortunate. If he received little food, or occasionally no food, that was fine too. His hunger never conflicted with the Dhamma in his heart. For most of his adult life, his diet consisted of rice and water, with small pieces of fish and some forest greens thrown in to add flavor. Afternoon refreshments like coffee and sugar were largely unavailable. In his old age, Ajaan Mun became a highly respected and famous senior monk, one who deserved the best food and the most comfortable lodgings. But a lifestyle of ease did not suit his temperament. Instead, he insisted on camping in remote wilderness areas, where the local farmers, who were themselves very poor, shared with him what little they could grow on small plots of sloping mountain land. Ajaan Mun found cloth to make and mend his robes in places where people threw away bits of old clothing, along the roadside, in refuse heaps, or at cremation sites. He picked up pieces of cloth that were soiled, wrinkled, and faded. Although they might appear tattered, when sewn together they produced a robe that was just enough to cover his body and protect it from the elements. He often slept on the ground, making his bedding of gathered leaves and his pillow of a folded robe. Using his outer robe for a blanket and the shade of a tree for a roof, he relied on this simple shelter wherever he traveled. Ajaan Mun used Dhamma's curative powers as his medical remedy of choice. When they were made available to him, he occasionally used the medicinal fruits, leaves, or tubers which grew wild in the forest. He took these traditional medicines either pickled in fermented cow's urine or boiled in plain water as a concoction. By caring for himself in these ways, he remained healthy in body and mind. Ajaan Mun's mind was powerful and all-encompassing, while his behavior was humble and unassuming. He believed in sacrificing his own interests to help others in need. When he received gifts of monks' requisites from lay supporters, he invariably left those articles behind when he departed so that other monks and novices could make use of them. He never hoped to gain more, nor did he fear going without. He neither sought pleasant experiences nor shied away from painful ones. Neither praise nor criticism aroused strong feelings. The beliefs and opinions that people expressed about him did not affect his serene state of mind. His mind was aware of everything, but attached to nothing. The sum of his wanting was next to nothing. The objects of his dispassion were nearly everything. Ajaan Mun possessed a mastery of psychic skills concerning all aspects of sentient phenomena. Over the years, his proficiency grew to such an extent that it seemed to have no limits. Because the monks living with him were aware of his extraordinary abilities, they took extra precautions to make sure they always remained mindfully self-controlled. They couldn't afford to let their minds wander carelessly, lest their errant thoughts become the subject of a Dhamma talk at the evening meeting. Giving helpful advice to non-physical beings from many diverse realms of existence was a responsibility that Ajaan Mun continued to take very seriously right up to the time of his death. He was in constant communication with such beings wherever he lived, though those interactions occurred most often in the mountainous regions of the north. During the years that he lived in those remote wilderness areas, far from human habitation, one group or another visited him almost every night. Aware that living beings throughout the sentient universe share a common heritage of birth, aging, sickness, and death, and a universal desire to avoid suffering and gain happiness, Ajaan Mun understood the benefit they received from hearing teachings on Dhamma as a means of fulfilling their spiritual potential and attaining enduring happiness. Because he possessed the eye of wisdom, he made no fundamental distinction between the hearts of people and the hearts of devas. He did, however, tailor his teaching to fit their individual circumstances and levels of understanding. Ajaan Mun could know things both apparent and hidden, including knowledge of the past and future. Although he displayed this ability on numerous occasions, his actions never concealed ulterior or worldly motives. His spoken words were derived from his own knowledge and insights, and expressed to make people reflect on their essential meaning. His eloquent discourses clarified the principles of Dhamma in a way that left no room for doubt, which made listening to his talks an inspiring learning experience. His teachings were fresh and invigorating, never stale or boring. He spoke of common, everyday things we saw and heard all the time, but never paid close attention to until he mentioned them. His teachings employed a full range of expression, sometimes casual, sometimes serious, and sometimes forceful when stressing specific points. He could analyze the disparate aspects of the Buddha's teachings and articulate them in a way that deeply affected his audience. I, myself, asked him questions about meditation problems that I couldn't solve on my own, and I always benefited from the wisdom of his answers. I was impressed by the fact that Ajaan Mun's advice never deviated from the path of practice taught by the Lord Buddha. For this reason, I became absolutely convinced that he was one of the Lord Buddha's present-day Arahant disciples. Courageous and masterful in the way he lived his life, he was never in danger of succumbing to the power of greed, hatred, or delusion. Even in old age, when he could have been expected to rest and take it easy because he no longer needed to exert himself in meditation practice, he still did as much walking meditation as he always had. So much, in fact, that the younger monks struggled to match his exertions. Never losing hope in his students' potential for enlightenment, Ajaan Mun fulfilled his teaching obligations with great compassion. His powerful words reflected his resolute character, and he invariably used the rhetoric of a warrior to inspire courage in his disciples. He delivered his talks with the force of his convictions, aiming to arouse in his monks the strength and tenacity needed to completely transcend craving in all its guises. He never compromised his principles or made allowances for his students' shortcomings. Instead, he relentlessly pushed his disciples toward the threshold of the deathless Dhamma.